And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
Welcome to Animal Farm, City Garage's weekly discussion of theater, politics, and pets. If you have a video of a pet you'd like to share with us, please do send it along or send a link along to animalfarm@citygarage.org. That's Animal Farm, one word, @citygarage, also one word, .org. Today we're joined by two playwrights, one from Pristina, Kosovo, and one from Berlin, Germany. Jeton Neziraj is from Kosovo. He was the artistic director of the National Theatre of Kosovo and now runs a cultural center in Pristina called Cendra Multimedia. He has written over 25 plays, been translated into multiple languages, and in the United States has been produced at both La Mama and City Garage Theatre. Roland Schimmelpfennig has written over 50 plays. He's from Berlin, Germany. He grew up in a college town called Göttingen near the eastern border of Germany. He has also been translated in multiple languages, and where Neziraj's plays are informed by the Reign of Terror by Milosevic. Schimmelpfennig's plays, Schimmelpfennig grew up in the shadow of Brecht and Heiner Müller, and his plays have a very different kind of character. And they're both here to discuss with us how their upbringings and what their countries were going through have influenced their writing. Welcome, Roland and Jeton. Welcome to Animal Farm. We have two playwrights. One is in Pristina, Kosovo, that's Jeton, and while Roland is in Berlin. And I want to ask each of you, respectively, maybe starting with Roland, why be a playwright? How did you come to be a playwright? And what is the connection between your playwriting and the country you live in?
I started to want to write plays being a pretty young man, very young man. But there was sort of always some sort of dream, and I had a huge love for theater and a big connection to theater. It was very important in my sort of small hometown. Theater was playing a big role there, and I had a huge connection with it.
The town being?
The town being Göttingen.
Göttingen.
Yeah. Göttingen is a small university German town, sort of a nice, more or less neat city, a little bit boring maybe, not the big thing, but good enough or big enough to have a city-financed theater, which has actually this proud name Deutsches Theater, German theater, and that was sort of a good place to start with theater, and to maybe to catch fire. There are a lot of students in town, and the students did their own independent theater, and so that's maybe where the first inspiration came from. And then I had that sort of as a dream, or maybe a little bit more vague, like I would like to write someday and make money out of writing in terms of writing literature. And I was a little bit pessimistic about the perspective of that, because how would you do that? Or how can you plan that? Especially being a very young man or being a very young writer, when maybe you don't have the experience, you don't know how to do it, and maybe also you don't have not such a lot of things to say yet.
Yes.
At the age of, I don't know, 18, 19. So it's sort of a weird thing. It was a dream. And then I sort of looked for jobs that seemed to me, in a little bit naive way, sort of similar to writing. And so I got closer to writing for a newspaper, being a journalist.
What kind of, was it general journalism, or did you have an area?
I had friends in Istanbul, and they invited me over after school, and so I more or less by chance I got close to the Turkish scene of journalists, and they had a publication that was in Turkish and German at the same time.
Yes.
So they would write one article in German, then the translation. That's how I got in. So I met them, and in Istanbul, the circle of journalists are sort of more or less democratically open, serious journalists is not so big. And so I got in touch with the German journalists working in Istanbul for German papers.
I see.
And then they offered me jobs, and I started to write for them for some daily appearing papers. And that's
so
where it started.
as a journalist, were you covering international scene? Were you covering specifically local immigration?
No, working in Turkey, I was covering Turkish issues. Let's say there's a huge hunger strike going on in the Turkish jail. We would try to write about it, because many of the Western journalists are not based in Turkey. Many are staying in Athens.
Yes.
So they're not really working from the base. And that's what I did. But then at some point I also had to accept that my Turkish was far from good enough to do a real hardcore investigation on my own. I always needed translators.
Yes. Yes.
And the translators were also sometimes more part of the problem than part of the solution, because I had the feeling, and it was that the translator maybe didn't like the outcome of whatever I was trying to investigate. But finally, I had to accept for myself that's not my thing. I mean, yes, I had a pen in my hand and I was writing something down, but it had nothing to do with art or writing.
Yes.
Then I got back to Germany and started studying as a director for theater.
Where did you study?
In Munich.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a good academy in Munich, one of the 2 or 3 that existed at that time in Germany for studying theater direction. Not history of theater or whatever, but sort of in a more practical way.
Yes.
And because that was the other job that sounded for me sort of close to writing. Yeah, well, theater, you have a text in your hand, and that was sort of another way to get closer to the idea. And from that on, I was working first as a student and an assistant director, and then sort of the classical educational way of the German theater system, working my way up, being a dramaturg at some time. And in that process, at some point, when I was, let's say, a little bit more experienced, maybe at 25, 26, I reached the point where I said, no, now I can do it. Now I can try and rewrite the play. I mean, I tried before, but I never really finished it. And at that point, I was ready to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jeton.
Well, yes, I started from completely different, different perspective. I had absolutely no connection to the theater and to the theater life in Kosovo. Also, theater at that time was barely existing. In 90s, when I finished my secondary school, I wanted to become a doctor. So I wanted to study medicine.
Yeah.
Why? Because it was basically only doctors that were making some money and making living out of their profession. This is a period in which nearly, or maybe more than 80% of the Albanian workers were kicked out from the the regime of Milosevic. So there was no kind of future in any other profession. So I decided to apply for Faculty of Medicine. I failed, luckily. Then I escaped to Germany. This was a period in which the Serbian authorities were sending you invitations so you could go to the army that was ongoing. I mean, to the war that was ongoing in Bosnia and Croatia at the time. So that for me was one good reason to escape. And then there was nothing you could do at that time in Kosovo. So I went to Germany, and by accident, I was part of an amateur group that was producing a play there. I was playing with violin, so they invited me to be a part of the group. And this was the first time I entered the theater. I was 19 years old, basically, when I kind of entered there, and I did like it. I mean, I have to say that by then I maybe read 2-3 plays, the school books that you get as a part of the curricula, and that was it. So I had no connection to it, and but when I came back from Germany after 15 months, 96, 97, in this period, I wanted to study film editing, because somebody was saying to me that they are going to open film editing at the University of Pristina, and this is new department, and then you can make some kind of career there. And I said, fine, so it sounds interesting. I had no choices. But then they didn't open this this department. What remained was mostly film directing, acting, or playwriting, dramaturgy, as it is called. For film directing, they told me, it's huge competition. For acting, I was not sure I had talent, and I think I was right. And then I started to ask people, so what is this dramaturgy? I mean, what is playwriting? What does it really mean? So people then told me it is about theater and film. So you have to write plays for theater and for scripts for film. So theater didn't really interest me that much, but when they say film, I said, okay, it might work. So I applied, I got accepted, but then I took it seriously. So I was aware that I knew nothing. I was like really tabula rasa, as they say, and I started writing plays ambitiously. Of course, I mean, nothing really important until maybe 2002, 3, or somebody would say even no, I'm not writing any important thing, but at least in my understanding, maybe then in 2002, when the play started to get staged, produced, and published, and so on and so on. So this was a period after the war. So the war started in 99. And we made a short break of like 6-7 months in that period. And then we came back into the public institutions. So I forgot to mention that when I got accepted, when I started studying in 96-7, we were studying in this so-called parallel system of education, because Albanian school kids and the students were kicked out of the public schools because they didn't, accept the Serbian curricula. So then Albanians created this parallel system of education, which meant that we couldn't access anymore the public schools, but we were, going to private houses some weeks, maybe escaping the police patrols to a church, and then some months maybe to another house there, and then in some basements for nearly 5, more than 5 years, 6 years basically. So it was the secondary school and 2 years of my university. And then when the war was over, then we could go back to the universities and finish there. So I was able to finish the playwriting. But it is interesting to say that in 90s, in this period, getting an education, it was not just some personal achievement you have now. Let's say you go to study because you want to get educated. It was some sort of national mission as well. So you had the sense that you are contributing to the freedom of the country. I want to be a good student, not just because some my personal reasons I want to be good, but by being good, I'm also contributing to the liberation and to the cause. And so was with the theater. So with those who were producing theater in 90s, but also those who were going to the theater, because it was sometimes more dangerous to go to the theater than to be in the theater and like produce work for the audience.
So in this new young regime then, so the art of writing plays or doing theater was, you're saying, was partly a patriotic mission, partly.
It was not officially, but you felt, by being there, by going to the theater, yes, and by studying, by being a good student, it was not just some personal mission, but also kind of sign of I exist here, so I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to be good. So I was, of course, we had no books in English at all in that period, and most of the literature, especially professional literature in theater was in Serbian. In Albanian, we had, of course, Shakespeare was translated and some important authors. But in terms of the theory, it was Brecht, it was Stanislavski, and Francis Ferguson, and maybe a couple of 2-3 authors, but all in all, maybe 10 theoretical books. So because of that, then I started to learn to improve my Serbian, so I could, access books and basically everything that was good and important in that time was published in so-called the Serbo-Croatian language, which was the official language of ex-Yugoslavia.
Yes. Did you feel that, Roland, I suppose it would be by contrast, but perhaps, but I don't know, I'd like you to tell me, when you were coming up in Germany, was there any sense of civic responsibility to as you started to cobble your way towards the theater, from journalism to theater, or what was the connection to the country, or was there one?
I would say, I think in my generation, the connection was not that sort of in terms of civic obligation or desire. Not as it was the generation of playwrights before. Let's say the generation of playwrights 10 years, 15 years older, or 20, Heiner Müller and others, they were of course closely connected towards their system or against the system.
Yes.
And my generation, I mean, the wall came down in 89, so I was 22 at the time. So we were, I think, more selfish, more egoistic, not so much into the political landscape, and at least not us from the spoiled West of the country, because Göttingen is in the ex-capitalist part, even if it's only 40 kilometers to the old Iron Curtain, to the border. But but being maybe let's say East German writer in my generation, it would feel a little bit different. But also for those that I know, I would not see in their work a continuous approach to this situation or the change of the system. Actually, the change of the system, which is a huge historical thing, not only for Germany but for the whole Europe, is imploded in terms of artistic ways, because it was something like a vacuum, and there was nothing coming up. There was not the huge movement, and now there's something new coming, and
Yes.
And you can see the results of this till today. This lack of whatever enthusiasm or political consciousness. So in my in my artistic career, politics, yes, were an issue, but not in terms of my responsibility as a writer towards my country. I wouldn't say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask both of you if you could describe a couple of your very early plays, and just to give us an idea of what was on your mind and how you were responding to your very different cultural and political situations, and then we'll jump into what you're working on now, now that it's decades later, and see if there's any kind of fusion or not. Because you two are now friends, so you obviously have some simpatico. There's some degree of a vision that's shared, and let's see if we can sort that out and see if it's artistic or if it's just you just like each other, and that's the end of it.
I think it's the principle of the pluses and minus. So I think artistically they are different.
Yeah.
No, I mean, to answer to your question, I think I had completely different sensibility in the beginning in approaching different topics, and I think that's a syndrome of the early writer when you are not really ready to write plays. So I was mostly writing, this, so to say, conventional structures of triangle, love triangle, and so one play that it's still alive from that early period that is with two actors. You know, I hate it, but it keeps being produced. So now they did the third production of it in Turkey.
So it's two.
So
let's dig in. It's two characters, and what happens?
No, it's a kind of love affair. I mean, the dead body there, and then the priest comes to kind of get in touch with his lover, and then the husband is there. So now it's a conflict between those two men. So there is some kind of religious sin, love, and
okay. Fair enough.
And you know, that was. It was considered good play of mine in that time. It won some national prizes and got staged at the National Theatre of Kosovo. And of course, I was proud then, but not anymore. I mean, it's there. I don't deny it, but I'm not very, very proud of it. But I had other plays that were mostly. I mean, and that time I think I was mostly reflecting on the war, at least from this period after the war. I was mostly writing some plays or trying to write plays about what happened in the war, and it took me quite a while actually to do this. I would call it a big step in which you are able to see the events that you witness it yourself from another perspective. So by not feeling that you are part of it, so to see the stories and the events from outside, which meant also adding some humor in it. So by writing about the horrors of the war, trying to see it from a perspective that would make it more light. Because what happened, I think, is that most of the writers felt obliged that they have to write about the war. Most of the Kosovo writers in that time. So this obligation then meant that you had to kind of stick to some kind of forms, which meant, okay, who were the victims, who were the perpetrators. So out of this frame, then it was complicated to write, and most of the writers didn't really move from this frame. So my not approach, but my kind of hard work was to try to go out of this box, try to see things in between, try to see different colors of this general picture of the war until I don't know, 2007-8, maybe, when I think moved into some sort of, if you can call it, political theater. But I have to say that a big shift happened in 2018 when I was removed from the position of the artistic director of the National Theatre. And this was a period I was really thinking, what kind of theater I'm going to write. I mean, am I going to continue writing, I mean, plays that you see in other theaters, what I'm going to do with myself, but also what I'm going to do with the company I was running, this Chandra Multimedia. So the first play I wrote was after that in 2011 was One Flew Over the Kosovo Theatre, which was a story on how Kosovo declared independence. So some sort of satirical play in about the independence of Kosovo. And this, of course, was complicated in that time because that was the biggest historical event that Kosovo had. I mean, fresh, but still the biggest achievement. So to poke on this issue, to make fun of it was, for some people offending. So there was an attempt from the government to censor it, to stop it. And so huge mess. But then I realized that, that's not bad, actually. So
nothing better for a playwright than to have the government try to shut down your play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, when I look at this period from, I don't know, 1998 till now, there is some kind of shift in, and I think it has to do with also the way you grow up as a person, but you grow up as a writer as well. In the early times, I was easily getting convinced that this is a worth topic to be on stage. Now I have to think twice. Now I take time to convince first myself and to I mean, I try to make good choices. Maybe they are not, but
Yes.
at least I invest a little bit more in what I'm going to write.
Thank you. Roland, you said at the very beginning you were writing, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but I got from it that there was a kind of self-absorption. You were not going to be like Heiner Müller. You were not going to be like Brecht. You were going to discover your own personal, you were going to work out your own personal issues through your theater. How has that evolved over the years, or has it? What's on your mind now as we're heading into 2021?
Yeah, well, I can see that my work has become more and more political, or connecting more with the real world, and the early work is very self-concentrated, not narcissistic, but you can see there's a young man angry with the whole world and talking about who's right, who's saying what's right, what's wrong, these things, the big things. Actually nice, important, but very, very from the bottom of all the anger. Now I still have a lot of anger in myself, and I still try to attack things, but I'm trying to connect with bigger themes, not so much in a national way, but in a more or less westerly international way. That started maybe with the Golden Dragon.
Yes.
You know, and that it seems to be maybe formally a little bit crazy play, but it is immigration, migration, xenophobia, sexual exploitation. It's all in there. So there is definitely a political play. It's not a manifesto, but it is something that tries to connect with things that's going on, and so have been others. Never in sort of a very obvious way, but still sort of strong enough to be so you can see what it's about. Winter Solstice is about the raising of the new right movement, also sort of the populist movement coming up. That was written in 2014, and since then I'm going more and more into how can I write about what's going on out there. Of course, that's not so easy, because theater play is not CNN, and it's not a newspaper. And if you want to write about that's terror, for example, I think you would get into a dead-end street if you write about but terror happens because this happened before, and there's left-wing, right-wing, and religious terror, whoever it comes from. You must avoid this sort of the funny details. You have to find the bigger picture, and that's the complicated thing. But that's what I'm aiming to, and interestingly. The last thing that I wrote, it was now this summer, a theater from Munich, they asked me to write a play about Corona. And I accepted, but in accepting it, I thought, oh, this is very difficult because there's no abstraction of Corona so far. Oh, well, I don't find any. And we don't know what's the end of all this. We don't know where this is all going. So I thought this is on the edge. I will try to do it because also, of course, people want to hear something about it. They want to share thoughts. They would be happy if there is some sort of text that communicates our fears or whatever, thoughts about Corona. So I did it, but I see, actually, one should wait maybe for several years.
Yes.
So that's why I'm very close to Jeton. I tend to think more and more before I decide this should be the next play, or this is worth writing about. Sometimes I think I should have waited even longer with some of my plays, but then you don't have the time, and the clock is ticking, and theaters wait. But in an ideal world, I would let it sink in for more time.
Thank you. To wrap up. Yes, on, please.
No, just to add, I mean, that's in connection to what Roland was saying. I mean, in my case, often, because today I was talking to somebody who asked me why you have all those titles in your plays, like Peer Gynt from Kosovo, Enemy of the People, then last place, Audience by Václav Havel. I mean, that's the title of the play. And I don't really know, but one reason that I believe it has to, that exists, it has to do with the fact that, for a playwright coming from a country that people have no clue about it, or everything is reduced to the war, they are a little bit skeptical that they might understand it. I mean, no matter if the play is, I don't know, has nothing to do with Kosovo, they still hesitate because they think, they know so little about this country, so they might get lost. I had this experience often when we were touring with our shows in Europe, and then I decided, maybe not conscientiously, to use those plays that, or references in titles that would make people understand that this is Peer Gynt from Kosovo. It's new play, but it has some kind of flavor to the so you will not get lost. So you have some good reference there, or to this other play in 5 seasons, An Enemy of the People, that has nothing to do with Ibsen's play, but it's just this idea of this character who is fighting for this cause, and then he pays the price. And I think this is something we carry in our shoulders. It's not just the content of the play itself, but also the complexity of the context that we have to kind of be able to explain. Sometimes not just through the plays, but also in my case also through the titles too.
Mm-hmm. What was the name of the Karl May play?
The Return of Karl May.
Yeah, excellent title. Karl May, maybe in the US is not so well known, but a popular trashy German author, and we all hope that he gets back one day from heaven.
I have a final question for each of you. A wrap-up question. If you could articulate, what is the standard now by which you assess that a play that you write, or that that you write, is worthy of the stage? Is there is there any kind of guiding principle, or is it just intuition?
If you ask me, I would say good play. If it's good, that's one, first
what does that mean?
step.
I don't know what that means.
It means good written play, then a play that is kind of dealing with some, I would say, urgent matters. It's not something that we could say, okay, this is good play, but it can wait, maybe next year we can stage it. No, it has to be staged now, because it is speaking of some matters that we are concerned. So I know lots of writers, they avoid this. I mean, they don't want to get involved in so to say complex political and social issues, because they are often turbulent or challenging and sometimes also dangerous. So they try to avoid this by writing, I don't know, topics that are related to, I don't know, as we spoke early last year, family issues, property, and so on and so forth. So I think if it's a reflection of what is going on now, it doesn't mean it has to be propaganda. It doesn't mean it has to be pamphlet play. And this is, I think, very often lots of writers and lots of theater critics, when they want to denigrate the political theater, they use those terms intentionally to say, this is pamphlet play, this is propaganda. But I think it doesn't have to be. I mean, you can avoid this by touching real problems, wounds of what is going on actually in this society. And that's for me something that is worthy. So it depends from the context, but as we see, I mean, in our areas, corruption is one main problem. racism, xenophobia, issues related to immigration, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Roland.
I think Jeton is fully right. He used the word urgent. I would say another term maybe would be, and also a difficult term, is a sort of relevancy. So for me, starting the play and also finishing the play, this question comes up all the time. Is this something that people would care about? Is it something that's really worth telling it? Is it just me, or is it something, this text or the story or this situation, something that communicates with the others, I mean, in the old way, when there were people in the audience, with, let's say, these 99 or 150 or 500 people in the audience. So do I tell a story that connects? That is, and that's also very important for me in the finishing part of the play. Is the way it is written? Does it breathe? Does it leave enough air for the audience to breathe and imagine their own 50% of the story? Is it flat, and is it sort of punching it, or is this play opening about, in a form of a dialogue or some game of question and answer? And sometimes it's the play that puts the question, and sometimes it's the audience who keeps questioning. So basically, is it relevant, and is it alive, or is it dead material? And then I think that's what Jeton refers to when he says, is it propaganda? Propaganda is dead. It's just flat. So that's the nice thing about a well-written play. I'm not talking about mine, but others, big ones, that you can see they never stop breathing, and they always tell something about ourselves. So that's my sort of my quality check. And then, of course, I can be wrong, but that's at least the idea.
That's the idea.
I think I mean, I don't really. Yes, they say theater is there to educate or feelings. Yes, feelings. Theater should educate our feelings, but should educate also our brain, and kind of make us aware and for the responsibilities we have for the world around. I mean, it's not enough to just go there and see a nice, beautiful, visually well-made theater play, but also we should, get something more out of a play we see. I mean, if you go in the theater and then you go in the same way you enter the theater, out of the theater, so then what's the point?
Walk out the same door you walked in, as they say. Yes.
Yeah.
Try to avoid it. Jeton Neziraj and Roland Schimmelpfennig, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Next week, Animal Farm returns to Los Angeles, where we'll be joined by the Artistic Director of Celebration Theatre, Michael Shepard. And now, please enjoy pictures of Rico on the Big Blue Bow honorary member, and a picture of Deuce, Peanut, Lucy, Rico, all dressed up and nowhere to go, and finally a video, Ready, Set, Eat, featuring the same pets.
Okay.